This incredible year 2024 is coming to an end, bringing us ever closer to the release of the highly anticipated Elden Ring Night Rain. But I know many of you aren't finished yet with extreme challenges of the Lands Between and the Land of Shadows. In this video, I'll be showcasing the best builds you can try to absolutely dominate the game easily and as fast as a lightning bolt. The builds in this ranked list are focused on maximizing damage output specifically for PVE scenarios. The gameplay footage comes from multiple playthroughs ranging from NG+ to NG+7, so keep in mind that performance might vary slightly depending on your progression. If you find your damage output to be lower than expected, it's likely that you are missing a key aspect of the build. To make sure you get the most out of these builds, I recommend watching the entire video so you don't miss any critical details. With that being said, let's open this list with an extraordinary weapon from the base game that is not as popular as it should be. The Ghiza's Wheel is a somber colossal weapon with a sick design, solid moveset, and a very cool chainsaw unique skill. Nonetheless, its real power lies on its R2 attacks that spin the weapon when attacking, dealing multiple quick hits. This feature is insanely broken as it can be boosted with the charge attack buffs and successive attacks buffs. If that was not enough, this weapon has a passive bleed build up to make sure you destroy those bosses in simple seconds. Sadly, this weapon is heavily underrated as its Sash of War is not as good as the R2 attacks. For this one, we are going to use the Ghiza's Wheel on +10, any weapon with the Raptor Optimist Sash of War to easily dodge any difficult attack. This one can be used with any other build, but I will not mention it to avoid being repetitive. I will do the same for the seal that we always use to cast our main buffs. In this particular case, we are going to be using R2 attacks, but we are not going to use the two-handed R2 attacks. For that reason, the Jellyfish Shield is very useful to boost the power of our R2 attacks. We are going to be using the Rakshas's armor set that in the same way than with these two items, we are going to be using it in multiple builds. So what this armor set does is that it increases your damage by 2% with each piece. With this build, we are using only 3 pieces, which means our damage is only increased by 6%. And we will combine it with the White Mask. The best talismans we can use are the Lord of Blood's Exaltation, the Axe Talisman, the Millicent's Prosthesis, and the Roaring Windsor Insignia. In our Flask of Wonders Physique, we are going to use the Blood-Sucking Crack tier and the Thorny Crack tier, but be sure to use any other tier you find useful. With this build, we are dealing only physical damage, that's why our best body buff is going to be Blood Boil Aromatic, but you can also use Flame Grant Me Strength. And I'm pretty sure that each one of these builds devours stamina, so be sure to craft some pickled turtlenecks to boost your stamina regeneration speed. But remember that it is completely optional. In every single one of these builds, we are going to be using our Erdtree blessing on the level 20. If you don't do this, your damage on the DLC will be significantly lower, so don't forget to level your Erdtree blessing. We are going to be using 50 on Vigor, 14 on Mind, 40 on Endurance, 66 on Strength and Dexterity, 25 on Faith, and 16 on Arcane. Golden Vow and Flame Grant Me Strength are going to be our main buffs, and if you want to proc bleed faster, you can use the Swarm of Flies. Now we have a great twin blade that used to be a mediocre weapon until it got buffed and now is totally broken. The Euphoria is a unique twin blade you can find in the late scenarios of the DLC, very well hidden. If you played this weapon before the buff, you know it was quite disappointing after all the parkour you did to get it. Currently, it only takes 2 charge heavy attacks to fully charge its buffing system and the Euphoria Vortex, allowing you to obliterate your enemies with a wholly damaged long-lasting laser beam until they are gone. With this one, we will use the Euphoria on +10 Rakshas's armor set with the Black Dumpling that increases our damage by 10% with each Madness proc. The best talismans are the H1's Exaltation, the Shard of Alexander, the Sacred Scorpion Charm, and the Roaring Windsor Insignia. In our Flask of Wonders Physique, we will use the Blood-Sucking Crack tier and the Holy Shrouding Crack tier. If you want, you can craft some pickled turtlenecks. Do not forget to level your Erdtree blessing to the level 20, this is the last time I mention it. To get the most out of this weapon, we are going to use 50 on Vigor, 25 on Mind, 40 on Endurance, 33 on Strength and Dexterity, and 81 on Faith. Golden Vow and Howl of Shabriri are going to be our main buffs. We are going to be using Blessing of the Erdtree to counter the HP drain effect of the Blood-Sucking Crack tier, and we are going to use Midra's Flame of Frenzy to build up Madness quickly. Now I'll explain quickly how you are going to buff your character with every build. First, you are going to use your Flask of Wonders Physique, then you will cast Golden Vow, and you will use your body buff. In this case it's Howl of Shabriri, but in some other scenarios it might be Blood Boil Aromatic or Flame Grant Me Strength. Now in this case we have enough faith to use the Blessing of the Erdtree that will heal our character on time, countering the HP drain effect of the Blood-Sucking Crack tier. And in this particular character we have enough faith to use the Midra's Flame of Frenzy to quickly build up Madness. This way we can easily activate these two buffs and also using our body buff. In some other builds you will need to buff your weapons with Seppuku, with Crackblade or Royal Knight's Resolve, but that will change depending on the build you are going to use. When it comes to broken weapons, we can think about a bunch of unique swords and giant blades with flashy skills. However, sometimes a completely busted weapon can be as simple as a spear wielded by a mere soldier. The Mesmer Soldier Spear is an infeasible weapon of the DLC that features an extraordinary double double piercing art to attack. For those who live under a rock, the most effective physical damage type of the game is Pierce, as it can make the heaviest armored enemies vulnerable. With this great spear we can deeply penetrate the hardest bosses consistently, draining their HP bars really fast. Now we are going to use the Mesmer Soldier Spear on plus 25 with the Royal Knight's Resolve Ashewar on the Quality Affinity. We are going to be using the entire Rakshasa's armor set. The best talismans are the two-handed sword talisman, the axe talisman, the spear talisman, and the Millicent's prosthesis, but you can also use any other one you find useful. In our Flask of Wondrous Physique we are going to be rocking the Blood-Sucking Crack Tier and the Spike Crack Tier that will increase our charge attacks. With this one our body buff is going to be Blood Boil Aromatic cause we are dealing only physical damage, but you can also use Flame Grant Me Strength. With this build we are using a lot of charge attacks, so the pickled turtlenecks are pretty useful this time. To get the max performance of this build we will use 50 on Vigor, 18 on Mind, 40 on Endurance, 74 on Strength, 55 on Dexterity, and 25 on Faith. Golden Vow and Flame Grant Me Strength are going to be our main buffs. As I previously mentioned, in this case we will need to buff our weapon before attacking with Royal Knight's Resolve, but the buff routine will remain the same as it will with every other build. First we use the Flask of Wondrous Physique, then we use Golden Vow, and then our body buff. That is the basic setup. As I said in one of my last videos, magic damage has been real quiet compared to Fire or Holy since the release of the DLC, but that doesn't mean we don't have overpowered magic builds to dominate even the magic resistant enemies. One of my favorite options is the Carian Sovereignty Ash of War, an improved version of Carian Grandeur that is twice as powerful. I recommend you to pair it with any Greatsword or Curved Greatsword in the magic affinity, as its performance will scale directly with intelligence. This way you will get an amazing hyper armor that will result extremely helpful if you wish to charge the skill to deal the max damage possible. In this case we will use the Knight's Greatsword on plus 25 with the Carian Sovereignty Ash of War on the magic affinity. I'm gonna be using the Asur's Glintstone staff to cast our spells faster, but feel free to use any other staff you have available. Even though in the gameplay clips I'm using the Rakshasa's armor set, after further testing I find that this one is a lot more effective when using the skill. So I recommend you to use the entire Spellblade set that will increase the damage of Carian Sovereignty by a total of 8% if you are wearing the full set. The best talismans we can use are the Shard of Alexander, Godfrey Icon, Magic Scorpion Charm, and the All Lords Talisman that will allow you to keep your buffs active till the end of the fight. In our Flask of Wondrous Physique we are rocking the Blood-Sucking Crack Tier and the Magic Shrouding Crack Tier, but you can also use any other tier you find useful. Especially with this build the Stomach Crack Tier works very well. With this build you can also use the Madness buffs, but you don't have enough faith to use the Midra's Flame of Frenzy, so you can spam Hall of Shabriri or you can use the Frenzy Flame Stone. This process is completely optional. In the gameplay footage of this build I didn't use these buffs. This one is not gonna be broken unless we use 50 on Vigor, 30 on Mind, 40 on Endurance, 25 on Strength, 12 on Dexterity, 80 on Intelligence, and 33 on Faith. Golden Vow, Hall of Shabriri, and Terra Magica are going to be our main buffs. With this one the buff routine is gonna be the same, but we will incorporate Terra Magica if we have the opportunity to use it. Next we have the Mogwin Sacred Spear. In my opinion the best weapon of its class. It's a little bit more complicated to use than the Mesmer Soldier Spear, but with enough practice can develop and absorb damage. It has a regular moveset, but what makes it great is its unique skill Bloodbone Ritual, better known as Nihil. Using this ability makes you feel like a true Lord of Blood because of its amazing bleed build-up, strong fire damage, and incredible range. It literally melts every enemy like butter, and you can easily dodge out of danger whenever you need to. With this one we are going to use the Mogwin Sacred Spear on plus 10, any weapon with Seppuku to start the fights with the bleed buffs active, and to feel a little bit more comfortable when using the skill we are going to use any weapon that can deal a lot of stance damage, or we can also use the large Glintstone Scraps. These two items are completely optional and they will only help you if you are planning to fully use the skill without taking a single hit. If you don't want to do that you can ignore these two items. We are rocking the Rakshasa set, and to increase our damage by 10% with each bleed proc we are using the White Mask. The most effective talismans for this build are the Lord of Blood's Exaltation, the Shard of Alexander, the Fire Scorpion Charm, and the All Lords Talisman, but feel free to use any other one you find useful. In our Flask of Wondrous Physique we will be rocking the Blood-Sucking Crack Tier and the Flame Shrouding Crack Tier. To get the most out of this weapon we are going to use 50 on Vigor, 25 on Mind, 40 on Endurance, 30 on Strength, 14 on Dexterity, 33 on Faith, and 80 on Arcane. Golden Vow and Hall of Shabriri are going to be our main buffs, but you can also use Flame Grant Me Strength if you don't want to take additional damage from Hall of Shabriri, and if you want to proc bleed faster you can use the Swarm of Flies. The DLC introduced a lot of new weapons and items, giving the build creation a wide variety of options to work with. A clear example of this is the Deflecting Heart tier, a fantastic crystal tier that allows you to deflect when guarding like in Sekiro. When you mix this tier in your Physic Flask, you can time your blocks in order to deflect an enemy attack exactly like we do with the Wolf's Katana. If we successfully deflect 4 enemy attacks, the next guard counter we perform will be boosted by a total of 80% 20%, being this value the maximum damage boost we can get by deflecting. Combining this incredible mechanic with powerful Ashes of War like Crackblade or Royal Knight's Resolve, we can boost our damage output to the skies. With this build we can use the sword lance on plus 25 with the Royal Knight's Resolve Ash of War on the heavy affinity. As you can see, I am using the backhand blades on plus 25 with the same Ash of War but on the keen affinity. The reason I do this is because I want to show you an alternative version of this build for this specific weapon. We need any weapon with seppuku to start the fights with the bleed buffs active. We are going to be rocking Rakshasa's armor set and the white mask once again. The best talismans are the Lord of Blood's Exultation, the Curved Sword Talisman, the Two-Handed Sword Talisman and the Spear Talisman specifically for the sword lance version. In our Flask of Wondrous Physique we are going to use the Blood-Sucking Crack Tier and the Deflecting Heart Tier. If you want you can replace the Blood-Sucking Crack Tier but do not replace the Deflecting Heart Tier, otherwise this build is not gonna work. With this one we are going to be dealing only physical damage, that's why our best body buff is going to be Blood Boil Aromatic, but if you want feel free to use Flame Grant Me Strength. To get the most out of the sword lance we are going to use 60 on Vigor, 20 on Mind, 40 on Endurance, 99 on Strength, 18 on Dexterity and 25 on Faith. Golden Vow and Flame Grant Me Strength are going to be our main buffs. Now if we want to use this build with the backhand's blade, the only change we need to do is to use the weapon on the keen affinity. We are going to use 99 on Dexterity instead of using 99 on Strength, and we are going to replace our last two talismans with the Millicent's Prosthesis and the Roaring Windsor Insignia. Now with this build we are going to be using the same process of the buff routine, Flask of Wondrous Physique, Golden Vow and Body buff, but before entering the arena we are going to use seppuku to start the fights with the bleed buffs active. You can do this with any build where you are going to be using the bleed buffs, which are the White Mask and the Lord of Blood's Exultation. And with this build you can also use the Madness buffs that last a little bit longer, but if you want to do that you have to reduce your Vigor and put those points on Fate to be able to use Hall of Shabriri. For that reason I prefer to use the bleed buffs because are way more practical and are perfect for this type of build. Now I already explained how the deflection mechanic works in this game, but I will do it quickly once again. First you need to use Royal Knight's Resolve, that is your first 80% boost. Then you will have to deflect 4 enemy attacks successfully to increase your damage by another 80%. Finally, in the last deflection you will perform a guard counter that will be dramatically boosted, dealing a lot of damage. If you block or if you deflect without using your tier, it's not gonna work. If Royal Knight's Resolve expire before performing the guard counter, it's not gonna work at the same level of power, but the advantage here is that you can reuse it and it's gonna work perfectly fine. With that being said, now you understand this build completely. What can I tell you guys? Initially I thought this weapon couldn't get any better until I discovered the oil pots. If you don't know what these items do, is that they boost your next fire damage instance by 50% and 75% for the hefty version. The Blasphemous Blade is one of the best fire weapons out there, but people play it mostly because you can heal your HP while you are using the skill, which is indeed a great feature of this greatsword. If you are struggling with one boss fight, this is the weapon you should try. However, it's also an amazing option to deal a ridiculous amount of damage while playing safely. For this one we are going to use the Blasphemous Blade on plus 10. If we want to increase our damage by 7.5% with each Madness proc, we better use the Madding Hand. Once again we are going to be rocking 3 pieces of the Rakshasa's armor set that will increase our damage by a total of 6%, and we will combine it with the Black Dumpling for a 10% damage boost with each Madness proc. The most effective talismans we can use for this build are the H1's Exultation, the Talisman of the Dread, the Fire Scorpion Charm and the Shard of Alexander. In our Flask of Wondrous Physique we are going to use the Blood-Sucking Crack Tier and the Flame Shrouding Crack Tier. And speaking about oil pots, these two items are extremely important. With one of these bad boys we will increase our fire damage dramatically. To get the most out of this weapon and to have an optimal build, we are going to use 50 on Vigor, 25 on Mind, 40 on Endurance, 24 on Strength and Dexterity and 99 on Faith. Golden Vow and Hall of Shabriri are going to be our main buffs. To counter the HP drain effect of the Blood-Sucking Crack Tier, we are going to use Blazing of the Erdtree, and to build up Madness quickly we will use the Midra's Frenzied Flame, but you can also do that by spamming Hall of Shabriri. I am not a big fan of spellcasting builds because I find melee gameplay a lot more interesting, but when a build is so broken and reliable I need to admit it. That is the case of the Night Comet, which from my perspective is the ultimate sorcery available in all of Elden Ring. You can quickly buff its damage to the moon, the projectile is partially invisible which guarantees a hit on enemies capable of dodging projectiles like Relana or Malenia, and it is extremely easy to use. You just have to spam it, run away from danger and keep spamming it. It's the easiest way to play this game at the moment. The only disadvantage I can point is that it's so effective that the gameplay gets boring so fast. In this case we are going to be using 2 Staffs of Loss and only one of them needs to be upgraded to plus 25. The other one will be only to stack its passive effect. If we want to increase our damage by 7.5% with each Madness proc, we can use the Madding Hand. We are going to be wearing 3 pieces of the Rakshasa's armor set and we will combine it with the Black Dumpling that will increase our damage by 10% with each Madness proc. The best talisman talismans we can use for this build are the H1's Exaltation, the Magic Scorpion Charm, the Graven Mask Talisman, and the Graven Skull Talisman. But we can also use the Beloved Stardust or the Godfrey Icon. In our flask of Wondrous Physic, we are going to use the Blood-Sucking Crack tier and the Magic Shrouding Crack tier. As you know, with this build we are going to be using the Madness buffs. For that reason, I'm going to be using the Frenzy Flame Stone to easily build up Madness while performing the buff routine. But you can also do that by spamming Hall of Shabriri, so this item is completely optional. To get the most out of this sorcery and to have an optimal build, we are going to use 50 on Vigor, 35 on Mind and Endurance, 12 on Strength and Dexterity, 93 on Intelligence and 33 on Faith. Golden Vow, Hall of Shabriri and Terra Magica are going to be our main buffs. And our main source of damage is gonna be the Night Comet, in my opinion the most overpowered sorcery in all of Elden Ring. I am actually an active player of the Curve Source weapon class. When you want to break the game easily and as early as you can, these are the blades you choose. But once you try the classic power stance blade build, you end up needing something fresh and more unique. And that is exactly what the wonderful Falk's unique Curve Sword has to offer to your Elden Ring experience. This awesome weapon from Shadow of the Erdtree gathers all the useful features of the other Curve Swords and combines them with its beautiful unique skill. Revenger's Blade is a destructive, relentless, and wild attack where we shred our targets to pieces in a storm of swift slashes. With this one we are going to use the Falx on +10 and any weapon with seppuku to start the fights with the bleed buffs active. In this case it's completely optional. Once again we are going to combine the Rakshasa set with the White Mask. The best talismans we can use are the Lord of Blood's Exaltation, the Shard of Alexander, the Millicent's Prosthesis, and the Roaring Windsor Insignia. In our flask of Wondrous Physic we will get the best results if we use the Blood-Sucking Crack tier and the Thorny Crack tier. Once again we are going to be dealing only physical damage, that's why our best body buff is going to be Blood Boil Aromatic, but feel free to use Flame Grant Me Strength if you want. With this type of weapon I really recommend you to use the Pickled Turtlenecks cause you will require a fast stamina recovery. And to get the max performance of our weapon we are going to use 50 on Vigor, 22 on Mind, 40 on Endurance, 45 on Strength, 80 on Dexterity, and 25 on Faith. Golden Vow and Flame Grant Me Strength are going to be our main buffs. The OG, the classic, the queen, the legend, the most hated and loved weapon of all times, always nerfed but never forgotten. The Sword of Night and Flame is the clear example that even if they try to recreate it with the Relana's crab blades, there is only one queen. This straight sword can be the most disgusting magic damage blade or even make you feel the burning flames of the sun itself. With 80 intelligence, the Comet attack drains the HP bar of your targets at the same speed of the magic power stream. With only 60 fate, you can do what you can see on screen. So if I had to choose, I will use the fire stance but with 99 on fate to get some sweet one-shots. In this case we are going to use the Sword of Night and Flame on +10, I'm gonna be using the Azur's Glintstone staff to cast our spells faster, but feel free to use any other staff you have available. If you want to use the magic attack of the weapon, you will have to use the Spellblade set. If you want to use the fire attack, then you will have to use the Rakshasa's armor set. I'm pretty sure that you know this, but the armor set choice is only to increase the damage. If you are not interested in dealing more damage, then feel free to use any other armor set you find useful. The most effective talismans we can use are the Shard of Alexander, the Relana's Cameo, the Magic Scorpion Charm, and the All Lord's Talisman. Remember that we will use the Magic Scorpion Charm if we are going to use the magic attack. If we want to use the Fire Wave, we will use the Fire Scorpion Charm. The same thing will happen in our flask of Wondrous Physic. We will be rocking the Blood-Sucking Crack tier for both cases, but we are going to use the Magic Shrouding Crack tier when using the magic attack, and we are going to use the Flame Shrouding Crack tier when using the fire attack. And if we really want to destroy our targets when using the Fire Wave, we can use the Oil Pots. As I previously explained, if you use them correctly, these two items can boost your fire damage by a lot. With this build you can also use the Madness buffs easily, but I feel the weapon is already very powerful, so I actually wouldn't do it. In order to get the max performance of this weapon, we are going to use 50 on Vigor, 25 on Mind, 30 on Endurance, 60 on Intelligence, and 80 on Faith. Golden Vow, Hall of Shabriri, and Terra Magica are going to be our main buffs. And if you really want to use the Madness buffs, feel free to use Midra's Flame of Frenzy, but it is completely optional. Speaking about classic builds, what would be of this game without the cheesiest builds available for us filthy casual gamers? I decided to address all the possible combinations for this type of build here because there is a huge variety of versions that could easily take up 5 spots on this list. For higher New Game Plus cycles, I will go with Seppuku on Bleed Affinity, with agile weapons such as the Gargoyle's Twin Blades or the Bandit's Curve Swords, always aiming to get the bleed proc as soon as possible. And for New Game Plus 4 and below, I will go with Crack Blade on Heavy Affinity with dual pickaxes, rusted anchors, or even dual great clubs for enemies weak to strike damage. The builds of this type follow the same structure of boosting the jump attacks as much as possible. For New Game Plus 7, where we rely on the bleed procs, we can use the Gargoyle's Twin Blades on +25 with the Seppuku Ash of War on the Blood Affinity, or the Beastman's Curve Swords on +25 with the Seppuku Ash of War on the Bleed Affinity as well. If we are in NG Plus 4, we can use the pickaxe on plus 25 with the crack blade dash of war on the heavy affinity, or the rusted anchor plus 25 crack blade dash of war heavy affinity as well, or against enemies that are weak to strike damage like Radagon or the Putrescent Knight, we can use the large club on plus 25 with the crack blade dash of war on the heavy affinity. We are going to be using the Greybird's Blackwheel armor that will increase the damage of the jump attacks by 10% and it will stack with the Claw Talisman, with 2 pieces of the Rakshas's armor set and the white mask. The best talismans are the Lord of Blood's Exultation, the Claw Talisman, the Millicent's Prosthesis, and the Roaring Windsor Insignia. This setup is optimized to be used with our bleed options. If we want to play only with physical damage, we will replace the white mask with the Rakshas's helm and the Lord of Blood's Exultation with the Spear Talisman. Nonetheless, the rest of the build is gonna be the same for all weapons. In our Flask of Wondrous Physique, we are going to use the Blood-Sucking Crack Tier and the Thorny Crack Tier, but the Stonebarb Crack Tier is a great alternative with this build. In this case, we are going to be dealing only physical damage, that's why our best body buff is going to be Blood Boil Aromatic, but feel free to use Flame Granny Strength if you want. As you know, the power stance builds devour stamina, so be sure to craft some pickled turtlenecks to boost your stamina regeneration speed. To get the most out of our weapons, we are going to use 50 on Vigor, 17 on Mind, 40 on Endurance, 80 on Strength, 10 on Dexterity, 25 on Faith, and 50 on Arcane. Golden Vow and Flame Granny Strength are going to be our main buffs. In this case, the only step that we need to add to the buff routine is to buff our weapons with Crackblade or Seppuku depending on the weapons we are going to use. Now we are stepping into the forbidden terrain of Elden Ring builds. At this point, it doesn't matter which one you choose. You can be sure that with any of these monstrous characters, you will be breaking the game in simple seconds. If you ask any incantation player which one is the best option you have to trivialize the entirety of Elden Ring, I'm pretty sure they'll answer Ancient Dragon's Lightning Strike, the most stupid and insanely overpowered lightning source of damage available in this game. With only one full charge attack of this wild incantation, you will take out the complete HP bars of the toughest targets you can imagine. This build is slightly different to the rest. We are going to be using 2 Gravel Stone Seals and only one of them needs to be upgraded to plus 25. We only need the other one to obtain its passive effect. With this build, we will not be able to use any armor set because we are going to be rocking the Priestess Heart. This item will allow our character to turn into a dragon and it will boost the Dragon Cult incantations by 20%. The most effective talismans for this build are the Lightning Scorpion Charm, the Godfrey Icon, the Flux Canvas Talisman, and the Faithful Canvas Talisman. In our Flask of Wondrous Physique, we are going to use the Blood-Sucking Crack Tier and the Lightning Shrouding Crack Tier. And if you want, you can also use a Pickled Turtleneck, but in this case it's completely optional. To get the max performance of this build, we are going to use 50 on Vigor, 35 on Mind and Endurance, 18 on Strength, 25 on Dexterity, and 99 on Faith. Golden Vow and Hall of Shabriri are going to be our main buffs. If you want, you can also use the Blessing of the Erdtree to counter the HP drain effect of the Blood-Sucking Crack Tier. And if you want to use the Madness buffs, you can use the Midra's Flame of Frenzy, but I don't recommend you to do it because the build is already very powerful. And our main source of damage is gonna be the Ancient Dragon's Lightning Strike incantation, but you can also use the Knight's Lightning Spear to control the boss fights by dealing stance damage. Now I'll quickly explain how to use the Priestess Heart. In first place, you need to use it to turn into a dragon. Then you will have to use it again to boost the power of the Dragon Cult incantations. So first you are going to use your Flask of Wondrous Physique, then you are going to cast Golden Vow, and if you want you are going to use a Pickled Turtleneck. And before casting your body buff is where you are going to use it again, so the effect is going to last as much as possible. That will be the only change that you need to do to the buff routine. There are weapons that are not very popular for a good reason. They lack of something or they are not as powerful as they should be. But I will never understand why the Marae's Executioner Sword doesn't have more recognition despite of being incredibly powerful and easy to use. This unique greatsword is one of those few weapons that scale with Strength and Arcane, reaching an extraordinary AR with a proper stat investment. Even so, the main feature of this weapon is its unique skill, Eochite's Dancing Blade. And I know I don't have to tell you once again what this skill does, but combining this burst of drilling attacks with the successive attacks buffs, we can get one of the highest DPS possible in this game. Now we will use the Marae's Executioner Sword on plus 10 and we will combine it with the Dancer's Armor set that will increase our damage of our skill by a total of 10% if we wear the entire set. The best talismans for this build are the Shard of Alexander, the Godfrey Icon, the Millicent's Prosthesis, and the Roaring Windsor Insignia. But if you are missing one of these talismans, you can also use the Magic Scorpion Charm, but the original setup is significantly better. In our Flask of Wondrous Physique, we will be rocking the Blood-Sucking Crack Tier and the Thorny Crack Tier. To get the most out of this weapon, we are going to use 50 on Vigor, 20 on Mind, 35 on Endurance, 80 on Strength, 14 on Dexterity, 33 on Faith, and 40 on Arcane. Golden Vow and Hall of Shabriri are going to be our main buffs. To be honest with you, I never imagined a Faith build could climb this high on the list, let alone secure second place. But it turns out that this stat can be easily considered as the most useful or effective of the game by itself. If you use the right weapons on the Flame Art or Sacred Affinity, your damage can grow dramatically as long as you have enough points on Faith, allowing you to dominate every type of enemy regardless of their resistances thanks to the versatility this stat grants. If you are facing an enemy that is resistant to fire damage, you use the Sacred Affinity, and if it's resistant to Holy, you burn it with fire. Quite simple. My favorite version of this build is the Fire Knight's Greatsword, but you can do it with the Milady, the Black Steel Twin Blade, or any other weapon that scales decently on these affinities. As you can see, with this build we can use a wide variety of weapons. We are going to be using the Fire Knight's Greatsword on plus 25 with the Royal Knight's Resolve as a war on the Flame Art or Sacred Affinity, depending on the damage we want to deal. In the same way, we will use the Milady on plus 25 with the Winstan's Ash of War on the Flame Art or Sacred Affinity. And we will also use the Black Steel Twin Blade on plus 25 with the Royal Knight's Resolve Ash of War on the Sacred or Flame Art Affinity, depending on the damage we want to deal. We are going to be rocking 3 pieces of the Rakshas's armor set with the Black Dumpling that will increase our damage by 10% with each Madness proc. The best talismans for this build are the H1's Exultation, the Two-Handed Sword Talisman, the Axe Talisman, and the Fire Scorpion Charm or the Sacred Scorpion Charm, depending on the damage type we want to use. If we want to use the Milady, we will have to swap the Two-Handed Sword Talisman with the Relana's Cameo and the Axe Talisman with the Shard of Alexander. But as you can see, it's a pretty subtle change, so you can use any of the 3 weapons at any moment. In our Flask of Wondrous Physic, we are going to use the Blood-Sucking Cracktear and the Flame Shrouding Cracktear or the Holy Shrouding Cracktear, depending on the damage we want to use at that specific moment. And if you want to increase your damage even more, you can use the Oil Pots or the Hefty Oil Pots. In order to get the max performance of this build, we are going to use 50 on Vigor, 20 on Mind, 40 on Endurance, 27 on Strength, 26 on Dexterity, and 99 on Faith. Golden Vow and Hall of Shabriri are going to be our main buffs. If you want, you can use Blessing of the Erdtree to counter the HP drain effect of the Blood-Sucking Cracktear, and in this case we actually need Midra's Flame of Frenzy to quickly build up madness in the buff routine. The only important thing to consider with this build and with any other fire build is that first you need to hit your enemy with a Hefty Oil Pot or a regular Oil Pot, then use Royal Knight's Resolve, and then you can attack your character. This way you will actually get the max damage possible. Well, it seems like that's how it is. I thought for a second that finally Bleed was taken down from the throne, but man, Pierce damage combined with Bleed in a power stance build that is not based in jump attacks is actually unbeatable. The secret of this build is the Twin Blade Talisman. This little guy increases the damage of the final hit of a light attack combo. However, it's not effective with many weapons as their light chains feature over 5 attacks even when power stancing. But in this case, the power stance moveset of the spear weapon class ends on the 3rd hit, which means we can easily make this talisman work, consistently boosting our last hit by 50%. So now we have pierce damage plus bleed and a last bonus of 50% on our final hit. I mean, what the fuck? For this one, the best weapons we can use are the Cross Naginatas on plus 25 with the Seppuku Ash of War on the Occult Affinity. But if you don't have another Cross Naginata or you don't have any of them, you can also use the Bloodfiend's Fork on plus 25 with the Seppuku Ash of War on the Occult Affinity as well. And I decided to include the Nagakiba in this setup because you are going to get a great performance if you use it on plus 25 with the Double Slash Ash of War in the Occult Affinity. Once again, we are going to use the Rakshas's armor set with the White Mask. The most effective talismans we can use are the Twin Blade Talisman, the Lord of Blood's Exultation, the Millicent's Prosthesis, and the Roaring Windsor Insignia. Anyways, if we only want to use the Nagakiba, we can replace the Twin Blade Talisman with the Shard of Alexander and the performance is going to be amazing without changing any other thing of the build. But I strongly recommend you to use the Dual Naginatas. This is currently the best setup when it comes to damage per second. In our Flask of Wondrous Physic, we will get the best results with the Blood-Sucking Cracktear and the Thorny Cracktear. And our body buff is going to be Blood Boil Aromatic because with this build we are going to be dealing only physical damage. But as always, you can also use Flame Grant Me Strength. To get the most out of our weapons and to have an optimal build, we are going to use 50 on Vigor, 15 on Mind, 40 on Endurance, 18 on Strength, 34 on Dexterity, 25 on Faith, and 90 on Arcane. Golden Vow and Flame Grant Me Strength are going to be our main buffs. And remember that you need to have your Scattering Blessing on the level 20 with every single build of this video. And the buff routine will be the same for this build, but you have to buff your weapons before entering the arena. Let me know in the comment section what do you think of these builds. Be sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel for more Elden Ring videos. I hope all of you accomplish each one of your goals for this new year 2025. Have a great day guys, my name is Carlos and I'll see you in the next one.